The northern winds howled across the fjords of Vestfold as Einar Dalsson stood at the prow of his longship, the Seakonunga. His weathered hands gripped the wooden rail as he gazed toward the jagged coastline ahead. 20 summers had hardened him into one of the most feared warriors among the Norsemen, yet there remained a thoughtfulness in his deep blue eyes that set him apart from many of his fellow raiders. "Land ahead," shouted Torgrim from the lookout position. "The Saxon shores!" A cheer rose from the crew of 30 hardened warriors. They had been at sea for nearly a fortnight, battling storms and rough waters in their quest for glory and riches. The monastery at Lindisfarne had been their original target, but winds had blown them farther south along the English coast. "Ready yourselves," Einar commanded, his voice carrying across the deck like thunder. "We make landfall at dusk." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the waves, Einar thought of his father, Dal Haraldsson, who had fallen in battle 3 winters past. It was he who had taught Einar everything: how to fight, how to sail, how to lead. But also how to question. "A true warrior knows when to raise his axe and when to extend his hand," his father had often said. These words had earned Dal both respect and suspicion among their people. Now, as the chieftain of their clan, Einar carried the weight of those teachings. The longship sliced through the water, approaching a small cove where the monastery of St. Cuthbert stood vulnerable against the darkening sky. Unlike many other raids, Einar felt an unusual hesitation. The dreams that had plagued him for the past moon cycle returned to his thoughts, visions of strange symbols carved in stone and a woman with eyes the color of spring leaves. As dusk settled over the land, the Norsemen beached their ship and moved silently toward the monastery. The stone structure loomed against the starlit sky, its occupants unaware of the approaching danger. "Remember," Einar instructed his men, "take what is valuable, but spare those who do not resist." This command, too, was unusual among Viking raiders, but none dared question Einar. His prowess in battle had earned him the right to lead as he saw fit. The attack began with a thunderous crash as axes splintered the wooden gate. Monks scattered in terror, some fleeing into the surrounding forest while others sought refuge in the chapel. Einar directed his men toward the treasury, where gold and silver religious artifacts would be stored. As the chaos of the raid swirled around him, Einar felt drawn to a small stone building separate from the main monastery. Something pulled him toward it, the same feeling that had stirred in his dreams. Leaving his men to their plundering, he approached the structure alone. The door was heavy oak, bound with iron. It opened with surprising ease under his touch. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of herbs and beeswax. A single oil lamp cast flickering shadows across walls lined with scrolls and bound manuscripts. And there she stood, the woman from his dreams. Her eyes widened in terror as she backed against the wall, clutching a leather-bound book to her chest. She wore the simple garments of a noblewoman, not a nun, and her dark hair fell in a single braid over her shoulder. "Stay back," she commanded in heavily accented Norse, surprising Einar with her knowledge of his tongue. He lowered his axe, studying her face. "You speak the language of the North." "I speak many languages," she replied, her voice steadying despite her fear. "I am a scholar." A woman scholar was rare enough among her own people, let alone one who spoke the language of the Vikings. Einar's curiosity overcame his raider's instinct. "What is your name?" She hesitated, measuring him with her gaze. "I am Petra Pennington, daughter of Lord Pennington of Northumbria." Her chin lifted slightly. "And if you intend to take me captive, know that my father will hunt you to the ends of the earth." A smile tugged at Einar's lips. "I have no intention of taking captives tonight." He gestured to the book she clutched. "What is it you protect so fiercely?" Before she could answer, shouts erupted from outside. The raid was turning violent, something had gone wrong. "Your men kill indiscriminately," she accused, her eyes flashing with anger. "That was not my command," Einar growled, turning toward the door. "Stay here." He rushed outside to find several of his warriors engaged in combat with armed men, not monks, but soldiers who must have been stationed nearby. The raid had become a battle. Einar joined the fray, his axe rising and falling with deadly precision. Yet even as he fought, he felt a strange reluctance. This bloodshed seemed wasteful, purposeless. When he saw an opportunity to end the conflict, he seized it. "Enough," he roared, standing over the body of an English captain. "Take what we have and return to the ship. Now!" His men, blooded but victorious, began their retreat, dragging sacks of plunder. Einar turned back toward the small stone building, compelled by something he could not name. When he reached it, he found the door ajar and Petra gone. In her place lay a small carved stone, etched with one of the symbols from his dreams. 3 moons had passed since the raid on St. Cuthbert's monastery. Einar had returned to his homestead in Vestfold, distributing the spoils among his men and offering sacrifices to the gods for their safe journey. Yet he could not shake the memory of the scholar woman with the spring-green eyes, nor the strange stone she had left behind. He kept the stone in a small leather pouch around his neck, often taking it out at night to trace the etched symbol with his fingertips. It resembled the runes of his people, yet was different, more ancient somehow. His younger sister, Sigrid, noticed his preoccupation. "You brought back more than gold from England, brother," she observed one evening as they sat by the hearth fire. "You brought back a haunting." Einar smiled wryly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps the gods have set me on a path I do not yet understand." "Then you should seek understanding," she replied simply, returning to her weaving. Sigrid's words echoed in Einar's mind as he made his decision. When the trading season began, he would sail not for plunder but for answers. He would return to Northumbria. The journey was made under the guise of trade rather than raid. The Seaconunga carried furs, amber, and walrus ivory instead of warriors armed for battle. They approached the English coast openly, flying banners of truce. The reception at the trading port was cautious but not hostile. Vikings were known both as raiders and traders, and those who came openly to exchange goods were generally welcomed for the wealth they brought. Einar established his presence at the market, but his true purpose lay elsewhere. It took nearly a fortnight of careful inquiries before he learned the location of Lord Pennington's estate. It lay a day's journey inland, nestled against the edge of a great forest. Leaving the ship under Torgrim's command, Einar set out alone, dressed in his finest garments but with his axe strapped securely to his back. The Pennington estate was impressive, a sprawling manor house surrounded by cultivated fields and protected by a wooden palisade. Einar approached the main gate openly, stating his name and purpose to the guards. "I seek an audience with Lady Petra Pennington," he declared. "Tell her Einar Dalsson of Vestfold wishes to speak with her." The guards exchanged skeptical glances but sent a messenger to the house. Einar waited, aware of the suspicious stares directed his way. Few Vikings came this far inland without violent intentions. After what seemed an eternity, the gate opened. Instead of armed guards, a single figure emerged, Petra herself. She wore a gown of deep blue, her dark hair partially covered by a silk scarf. Her expression was guarded as she approached. "Einar Dalsson," she said, stopping several paces away. "You have traveled far from your fjords." "I have," he agreed, studying her face. In the clear light of day, she was even more striking than in his memories, high cheekbones, a determined mouth, and those remarkable eyes. "I came seeking answers." She glanced at the guards watching from the palisade. "Walk with me," she said, gesturing toward a path that led around the side of the estate. They walked in silence until they reached an apple orchard where they could speak privately. Petra turned to face him, her posture tense. "You left this," Einar said, withdrawing the carved stone from its pouch. Her eyes widened slightly as she looked at it. "You kept it." "It has appeared in my dreams since before we met," he admitted. "What does it mean?" Petra hesitated, clearly weighing her words carefully. "It is a key," she finally said, "to knowledge long forgotten by both your people and mine." "Knowledge of what?" "Of what lies beneath the surface of our world." She reached out, taking the stone from his palm. Their fingers brushed, sending an unexpected warmth through Einar's hand. "This symbol represents Uruz, the Aurochs, strength of will and determination." "It is similar to the runes of my people," Einar observed. "Because they share a common origin," Petra explained. The ancient ones, those who walked these lands before Saxons or Norse, left their wisdom encoded in symbols. I have spent years studying them. At the monastery. She nodded. The monks preserve knowledge, though much of what I study they consider pagan sorcery. A smile touched her lips. They tolerate me because of my father's status and donations. Einar considered this information. Why show this stone to me? Why leave it behind? Her expression grew serious. Because in the moment we met, I recognized you from my own dreams. You were standing before a great stone archway, holding back a darkness. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. The old powers are stirring, Einar Dalsson. I believe we both have roles to play in what is to come. Before Einar could respond, a shout came from the direction of the manor house. Petra turned, her face suddenly anxious. That is my father's steward, she said. You must go. My father would not welcome a Viking on his lands, especially so soon after the raids. When can we speak again? Einar asked, reluctant to leave with so many questions unanswered. There is an abandoned Roman watchtower at the edge of the forest, she replied quickly. Meet me there when the moon is full, 3 nights from now. Einar nodded, committing the location to memory. As he turned to leave, Petra caught his arm. Be cautious, she warned. There are those who would prevent what is to come. The abandoned watchtower stood like a solitary tooth against the night sky, its stone silvered by the full moon. Einar approached cautiously, one hand resting on the haft of his axe. The forest surrounding the tower was unnaturally quiet, no owl hoots or fox calls disturbed the stillness. As he neared the entrance, a soft glow emanated from within. Petra had arrived before him. Einar entered the circular stone structure, finding her kneeling beside a small fire at its center. Around her were arranged several objects, the carved stone he had returned, a bronze bowl filled with water, a small knife, and a leather bundle. She looked up as he entered, her face solemn. You came. I gave my word, he replied simply, moving to sit across from her. Though I still do not understand why the gods have connected our paths. Perhaps it is not your gods or my god, she suggested, but something older that calls to us both. She unwrapped the leather bundle, revealing a collection of stones similar to the one he had carried, each carved with different symbols. These were scattered across Britain and the northern lands, waiting to be gathered. By you. By those who can read them. She arranged the stones in a circle around the fire. I have gathered 7. There are 5 more to be found. Einar studied the symbols, recognizing elements of the runes he knew but combined in unfamiliar ways. What power do they hold? They are keys to the temple of the ancestors, Petra explained. A place of great power that lies hidden between our lands. She looked up at him, the firelight reflecting in her eyes. Legend says it was sealed long ago to prevent misuse of its magic, but that in times of great darkness, it must be opened again. And you believe such times are upon us? I have seen visions of ships burning on black waters, of armies clashing beneath skies red as blood, she said quietly. Have your seers not foretold similar things? Einar thought of the Volva who had visited his village before the winter, the blind seeress whose prophecies were respected throughout the north. She had spoken of a great upheaval, of the world tree trembling. They have, he acknowledged. But what has this to do with us? Petra reached across the stones and took his hand. Her touch was warm, her fingers calloused from writing, not the soft hands of a noblewoman who did no labor. The remaining stones can only be found by those who share the blood of the ancestors, she said. I believe that includes both of us, though our peoples have been enemies for generations. Einar looked down at their joined hands, her pale fingers against his sun-darkened skin. That would explain much, he murmured. The dreams, the feeling of recognition when we met. She nodded. I need your help to find the remaining stones before others do. Others? There are those who seek the power of the temple for their own purposes, Petra said grimly. They call themselves the Order of the Serpent, and they have hunted me since I found the first stone 3 years ago. A protective instinct surged through Einar. These enemies, they are dangerous. Very. They have followers in both your lands and mine. She released his hand and reached for the bronze bowl. I can show you. Petra dipped her fingers into the water and whispered words in a language Einar did not recognize. The water's surface began to ripple, though nothing had disturbed it. As Einar watched, images formed in the bowl, men in dark robes performing rituals around stone circles, sacrificing animals, and collecting their blood. The final image showed a tall, gaunt man with a raven-black beard and cold eyes. Roderick, Petra said, her voice tight with fear. He leads them. He was once my father's trusted advisor until I discovered his true allegiance. The water stilled, the images fading. Einar sat back, absorbing what he had learned. Part of him, the practical Viking raider, questioned whether this was some elaborate deception. Yet his instincts told him Petra spoke truth, and the dreams he had experienced could not be dismissed. If I help you, he said finally, it means betraying the purpose for which I came to these shores. My people expect me to return with trade goods, at the very least. And if you do not help, Petra countered, there may not be shores to return to, nor people to trade with. The power the Order seeks could reshape the world, and not for the better. Einar studied her face in the firelight, seeing determination mingled with fear. He had faced many enemies in battle, but never one that threatened both their peoples equally. This was not a fight for plunder or territory but for something far greater. Where do we begin? He asked. Relief washed over Petra's features. The next stone lies far to the north, in the land your people call Alba. The wild country of the Picts. A dangerous journey, Einar observed. For both of us. Yes, she agreed. We would need to travel by sea, then inland. The stone is said to be kept in a sacred cave near the great pine forests. My ship can take us up the coast, Einar said, already considering the practical aspects of such a journey. But you cannot simply disappear. Your father will send men searching for you. Petra's expression hardened. I have considered that. I must leave a message suggesting I have gone on pilgrimage to a distant shrine. It will buy us time. As they discussed the details of their plan, Einar found himself increasingly drawn to Petra's intelligence and courage. She was unlike any woman he had known, neither the shield maidens of his homeland nor the demure noble ladies of the Saxon courts. She occupied a space entirely her own. Their planning was interrupted by a sound from outside the tower, the snap of a twig underfoot. Einar was on his feet instantly, axe in hand. Petra quickly gathered the stones into her leather pouch. Extinguish the fire, Einar whispered, moving toward the entrance. Petra smothered the flames with dirt, plunging the interior into darkness lit only by moonlight through the open roof. They pressed themselves against the wall beside the doorway, listening. Footsteps approached, several people moving with attempted stealth. Einar could make out at least 3 distinct patterns. He signaled to Petra to stay behind him. A shadow fell across the doorway as someone peered inside. Einar tensed, ready to strike. The figure stepped into the tower, a sword gleaming in the moonlight. Before the intruder could fully enter, Einar attacked, driving his axe handle into the man's midsection, then bringing the flat of the blade against his head. The man crumpled without a sound. 2 more rushed in. Einar engaged them both, his movements fluid and deadly in the confined space. One fell quickly, but the second proved more skilled, parrying Einar's attacks and driving him back toward where Petra stood. Behind you! Petra suddenly shouted. Einar spun to see a 4th man grabbing Petra. Acting on instinct, he threw his dagger, catching the attacker in the shoulder. The man howled in pain, releasing Petra, who immediately drove her small knife into his thigh. He stumbled backward, falling through the doorway. The remaining swordsman used the distraction to lunge at Einar, who narrowly avoided the blade. It sliced through his tunic, drawing blood from his side. Einar roared in pain and anger, bringing his axe around in a powerful arc that caught his opponent's sword arm. There was a sickening crunch as bone shattered. The man collapsed, screaming. We must go, Einar said, retrieving his dagger from the wounded attacker outside. There may be more. Petra nodded, clutching her pouch of stones. These were Roderick's men. He knows we're working together now. They fled into the forest, Einar ignoring the burning pain in his side. They needed distance before they could rest. As they ran, the night seemed to close around them, the forest becoming a maze of shadows and hidden obstacles. After what felt like hours, they reached a small stream. Einar slowed, his breathing labored. "We can follow this downstream," he said. "It will lead to the river, and from there to the coast where my ship awaits." Petra approached him, her face concerned in the moonlight. "You're injured." "It's nothing," he dismissed, though the wound throbbed painfully. "Let me see," she insisted, setting down her pouch and reaching for his tunic. Reluctantly, Einar allowed her to examine the cut. Her fingers moved gently along his ribs, probing the wound. "Not deep enough to fear death," she murmured, "but it needs cleaning and binding." She tore a strip from her undergarment and soaked it in the stream water. "This will sting." Einar barely flinched as she cleaned the wound, though the cold water sent sharp pains through his side. As she worked, he studied her face, intent, focused, a strand of dark hair falling across her cheek. Without thinking, he reached out to tuck it behind her ear. She paused, looking up at him with surprise. "Thank you," he said simply. "For the warning, and for this." A slight flush colored her cheeks. "We need each other now," she replied, finishing the bandage. "Our fates are intertwined." As she spoke the words, Einar felt their truth resonate within him. Whatever force had brought them together, gods, fate, or ancient magic, had created a bond that transcended the enmity between their peoples. And something more was growing alongside it, something he had not expected to find on English shores. Dawn broke over the eastern horizon as Einar and Petra reached the coastal trading post where the Seekonunga was anchored. They had traveled through the night, avoiding roads and settlements. Petra now wore a hooded cloak borrowed from a farmer's drying line, concealing her identity. Torgrim met them at the ship, his expression a mixture of relief and suspicion when he saw Petra. "A captive, Einar?" he asked in Norse. "A guest," Einar corrected firmly. "And one who speaks our tongue, so mind your words." Torgrim's eyebrows rose, but he made no further comment. "The men are restless. They expected to be heading home by now." "Plans have changed," Einar said. "We sail north, to Alba." This announcement drew murmurs from the crew who had gathered on deck. One stepped forward, Gunnar, the oldest among them and a respected warrior. "North? The trading is poor there, and the natives hostile," he objected. "What business do we have in that wilderness?" Einar knew he owed his men an explanation, but the full truth would be difficult for them to accept. "There is a treasure," he said, which was not entirely a lie. "One that will bring greater glory than silver or gold." "What treasure is worth more than silver?" asked another crewman skeptically. "Knowledge," Einar replied. "Power that our ancestors knew but has been forgotten." Petra stepped forward, lowering her hood. "Your chieftain speaks truth," she said in clear, confident Norse. "I am Petra Pennington, a scholar of ancient wisdom. What we seek in Alba will benefit both our peoples." The crew stared at her in astonishment, unused to Saxon women who spoke their language and addressed them directly. Einar watched their reactions carefully, ready to assert his authority if needed. Gunnar was the first to recover. "A Saxon scholar who speaks like a Norseman," he mused. "These are strange times indeed." He turned to Einar. "You vouch for her?" "With my life," Einar replied without hesitation. The old warrior studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. "Then to Alba we sail." The crew dispersed to prepare for departure, though Einar noticed the curious glances directed at Petra. She would need to prove herself worthy of their respect during the journey ahead. They set sail with the morning tide, the Seekonunga cutting through the waves with practiced ease. Einar stood at the helm, watching the English coastline recede behind them. Petra joined him, her face turned into the salt spray. "Your men are loyal," she observed. "They trust my judgment," Einar replied. "Though that trust is not unlimited. They will need to see results from this quest." And if they don't? Einar's mouth tightened. Then my leadership will be challenged. It is our way. Petra considered this. Among my people, leadership passes through bloodlines, not merit. Your way has advantages. And disadvantages, Einar countered. Blood feuds that last generations, power struggles that weaken us against common enemies. Like the Order of the Serpent, Petra said quietly. Yes. Einar adjusted their course slightly, guiding the ship northward. Tell me more about this enemy we face. Petra gazed out over the grey waters, gathering her thoughts. The Order believes the power of the ancestors should belong to a select few, those they deem worthy to rule over all others. They seek to open the temple not to restore balance but to harness its magic for domination. And what do you believe this power should be used for? Einar asked, studying her profile against the morning sky. To heal the breach between worlds, she replied. The ancestors spoke of a time when the realm of spirit and the realm of matter would drift too far apart, causing chaos in both. The temple was built as a bridge to realign them when needed. These are complex matters for a simple raider, Einar said with a self-deprecating smile. Petra turned to him, her expression serious. You are far from simple, Einar Dalsson. You question where others merely act. You seek understanding where others seek only profit. The dreams chose you for a reason. Her words stirred something in Einar, a recognition of a path he had sensed but never clearly seen. His father had always told him he was destined for more than raiding, though neither had known what that might be. The journey north took several days, during which Petra gradually earned the respect of the crew. Her knowledge of navigation by stars impressed even the most experienced sailors, and her willingness to share in the ship's duties, cooking, mending sails, keeping watch, demonstrated that she expected no special treatment. In the evenings, she would take out her stones and study them by lamplight, sometimes asking Einar questions about Norse runes and their meanings. These conversations often continued late into the night, the two of them sitting close together at the stern while the rest of the crew slept. On the fifth night, as they approached the wild coastline of Alba, Einar found himself telling Petra about his childhood in Vestfold, about his father's unconventional teachings and his mother's death when he was young. My sister Sigrid raised me as much as my father did, he explained. She taught me to see beauty in small things, the pattern of frost on a leaf, the way sunlight filters through mist. She sounds remarkable, Petra said, smiling. I would like to meet her someday. And your family? Einar asked. You speak of your father, but not your mother. Petra's smile faded. My mother died bringing me into this world. My father never remarried, though many urged him to. He raised me himself, allowing me freedoms few women in my position enjoy. She traced the outline of one of the stones with her fingertip. He encouraged my studies, even when the priests disapproved. I fear my disappearance will hurt him deeply. When this is done, Einar promised, I will see that you return safely to him. Petra looked up, meeting his gaze. And then you will return to your fjords. It was a statement, not a question, yet Einar heard the unspoken inquiry beneath it. What would happen when their quest was complete? Would they simply return to being Viking and Saxon, enemies divided by sea and custom? I do not know what the future holds, he admitted. But I know that meeting you has changed my path forever. In the dim light, he saw color rise to her cheeks. She looked down at the stones again, but her hand moved across the deck to cover his. They sat in comfortable silence, the gentle rocking of the ship and the sound of waves against the hull creating a private world around them. The moment was broken by Torgrim's approach. Einar, there are lights along the shore ahead. Settlements, perhaps, or signal fires. Einar reluctantly withdrew his hand from Petra's and rose to his feet. We'll anchor in that sheltered cove to the east, he decided after studying the coastline. Better to approach by land than risk being seen from the sea. As Torgrim moved away to relay the orders, Petra gathered her stones. We're close, she said, her voice tinged with excitement and apprehension. I can feel the pull of the next stone stronger now. Einar felt it too, a subtle tugging sensation, drawing him toward the dark forests visible even in the night. "Tomorrow we begin the search," he said. "You should rest." But rest proved elusive for both of them. The pull of the stone, combined with the anticipation of what lay ahead, kept them awake as the ship anchored in the sheltered cove and the crew settled for the night. Einar found Petra at the bow in the pre-dawn hours, staring toward the shoreline. "The cave lies within a sacred grove," she told him without preamble. "The Pictish people consider it a dwelling place of spirits. They will not welcome intruders." "Then we must not appear as intruders," Einar replied. "We come seeking wisdom, not conquest. The distinction may be lost on them if they see a Viking warrior approaching their holy site." Einar considered this. How would they receive a pilgrim accompanied by her protector? Petra's eyes widened slightly as she understood his suggestion. "We present ourselves as spiritual seekers?" "It could work, though we would need to leave most of your men with the ship." "Torgrim and Gunnar can accompany us," Einar decided. "The others will remain here, ready to depart quickly if needed." As dawn broke over the eastern horizon, they prepared for the journey inland. Einar exchanged his warrior's garb for simpler clothing. Though he kept his axe, it would be foolish to venture into unknown territory completely unarmed. Petra wore her hooded cloak over her Saxon dress, carrying a small pack with the stones and other necessities. Torgrim and Gunnar, selected for their level heads as much as their fighting skills, joined them in the small boat that would take them ashore. As they rowed toward the beach, Einar noticed Petra whispering under her breath, her eyes closed. "A prayer?" he asked quietly. She opened her eyes, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Of sorts. Words of protection from the old tongue." The boat scraped against the pebbly shore, and they disembarked. The coastline of Alba was rugged and wild, with towering cliffs and dense forests that began almost at the water's edge. They could see no sign of habitation, but smoke rising from beyond the tree line suggested settlements nearby. "The grove lies to the northwest," Petra said, orienting herself by the rising sun. "Perhaps a day's journey on foot." They set off, following game trails through the forest. The trees here were ancient, towering pines and gnarled oaks that had witnessed centuries pass. Moss covered the ground and lower trunks, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that reminded Einar of the sacred groves in his homeland where offerings were made to the gods. As they traveled deeper into the forest, the feeling of being watched intensified. Einar kept his hand near his axe, his senses alert for any sign of danger. Torgrim and Gunnar flanked them, equally vigilant. By midday, they had covered considerable ground, stopping briefly to eat dried meat and berries gathered along the way. As they rested beside a small stream, Petra suddenly stiffened. "We're not alone," she whispered, her gaze fixed on something beyond Einar's shoulder. He turned slowly to see figures moving among the trees, slender, quick shapes that appeared and disappeared like shadows. Their watchers made no attempt to approach but seemed content to observe from a distance. "The Pict people," Gunnar murmured. "Forest demons, some call them." "Not demons," Petra corrected firmly. "Just a different people with different ways." Einar stood, deliberately keeping his hands visible and away from his weapons. "We come in peace," he called out in the trading tongue used along the coasts. "Seeking wisdom of the old ones." For a long moment, there was no response. Then a figure stepped from behind a massive oak tree, a woman of middle years, her face marked with blue swirling tattoos and her hair braided with feathers and bones. She carried a staff topped with an animal skull, possibly a deer. "Why does a Northman seek old wisdom?" she asked in the same trading tongue, her accent thick but understandable. "Your people bring only blood and fire to our shores." Einar felt Petra move to stand beside him. "Not this Northman," she replied before he could speak. "He is guided by dreams, as am I. We seek the sacred stone in the Cave of Spirits." The tattooed woman's eyes narrowed. "The speaking stone? It is not for outsiders." "We are not as outside as we appear," Petra said, reaching slowly into her pack. She withdrew one of her carved stones, holding it up so the sunlight caught the etched symbol. "We follow the path of the ancestors." The woman's expression changed from suspicion to astonishment. She approached cautiously, examining the stone without touching it. After a moment, she looked up at Petra with new respect. "You are a keeper," she said. "Why did you not say so immediately?" "Because such knowledge is dangerous in these times," Petra replied. "There are those who seek the stones for dark purposes." The woman nodded gravely. "The shadow followers. They came to our lands last season, offering gold for access to the sacred places." Her face hardened. "We sent them away with fewer men than they came with." "Then you understand the importance of our quest," Einar said. The woman studied him, her gaze penetrating. "You are bound to the female keeper." Einar glanced at Petra, unsure how to answer. Their connection defied simple explanation. "Our paths are joined by forces greater than ourselves," Petra answered for him. "He protects the stones as I do." This seemed to satisfy the tattooed woman. "I am Fern, priestess of the grove. Come. I will lead you to the cave, but the trial you face there is your own." She turned and walked into the forest, clearly expecting them to follow. Einar exchanged glances with Torgrim and Gunnar, who looked uncertain but resigned to this unexpected development. "Stay alert," he told them quietly. "But follow her lead." Fern led them deeper into the forest, following paths that would have been invisible to untrained eyes. The trees grew more massive, their canopies blocking much of the sunlight and creating a perpetual twilight beneath. Strange symbols were carved into some of the trunks, spirals, circles, and angular marks that reminded Einar of the stones Petra carried. By late afternoon, they reached a clearing where a circle of standing stones rose from the earth. Each stone was twice the height of a man, weathered by centuries of wind and rain. In the center of the circle burned a small fire, tended by another tattooed figure, this one an elderly man whose skin was so covered in blue markings that little of his natural tone remained visible. "Kalian," Fern called to him. "We have seekers for the speaking stone." The old man looked up, his milky eyes suggesting partial blindness. Yet when his gaze fell upon Einar and Petra, he smiled as though seeing them clearly. At last, he said in a creaking voice, "The dreamer and the scholar. The stones have spoken of your coming." Petra stepped forward respectfully. "Then you know why we are here." "To prevent the sundering of worlds," Kalian replied, rising stiffly to his feet. "But first, you must be purified before entering the cave. The spirits do not welcome the touch of the outside world." What followed was an elaborate ritual that lasted until sunset. Einar, Petra, Torgrim, and Gunnar were instructed to remove their outer garments and wash in a nearby spring. Then Fern painted symbols on their foreheads and hands using a blue paste that smelled of herbs and minerals. Throughout the process, Kalian chanted in a language that sounded ancient even to Einar's ears, which were accustomed to the old poetry of his people. When the ritual was complete, they were given simple robes of undyed linen to wear. Einar felt strangely vulnerable without his weapons, but he understood the necessity of respecting the Pictish customs. As darkness fell, Fern lit a torch and led them beyond the stone circle to a narrow path that wound up a hillside. The forest gave way to rocky terrain, and soon they could see the mouth of a cave set into the hillside, partially concealed by hanging vines. "Only the dreamer and the scholar may enter," Fern instructed, handing the torch to Petra. "Your protectors must wait here." Torgrim and Gunnar looked to Einar for guidance. He nodded reassuringly. "Keep watch," he told them. "We will return by dawn." The cave entrance was low, forcing them to duck as they entered. The passage quickly widened, however, revealing a cavern whose walls glittered with mineral deposits that caught and reflected the torchlight. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness beyond, creating a rhythmic accompaniment to their footsteps. "Can you feel it?" Petra whispered, her voice echoing slightly. Einar nodded. The pulling sensation he had experienced since approaching this land had intensified, drawing him deeper into the cave. They followed the main passage as it curved downward, the air growing cooler and damper. After what seemed like hours but might have been only minutes in the timeless environment of the cave, they reached a chamber where the passage opened into a circular space. In the center stood a stone altar, and upon it rested a carved stone larger than the ones Petra carried. As they approached the altar, the torch's flames suddenly flared higher, illuminating cave paintings that covered the walls of the chamber. The images depicted figures that appeared neither fully human nor animal, engaged in what seemed to be ritual activities around a great archway. The temple, Petra breathed, moving closer to examine the paintings. And the ancestors who built it. Einar's attention remained fixed on the stone. Unlike Petra's smaller tokens, this one was the size of a man's head, carved with multiple symbols arranged in a spiral pattern that drew the eye inward. As he reached toward it, a voice spoke from the shadows beyond the altar. "I knew you would lead me to it eventually." Einar spun toward the sound, instinctively moving to place himself between Petra and the unknown speaker. From the darkness emerged a tall figure in a black robe, the man Petra had shown him in the water vision. "Roderick! How did you find us?" Petra demanded, her voice steady despite the fear Einar could sense in her tense body. Roderick smiled coldly. "Did you think you were the only one who could read the signs? I've been following your progress since you left England." He gestured toward the cave entrance. "Your Pictish friends proved quite cooperative once properly persuaded." Einar's heart sank at the implication. "What have you done to them?" "Nothing permanent, yet," Roderick replied dismissively. "My men merely ensure their good behavior while we conclude our business here." His gaze fixed on the stone. "Now, step aside. That does not belong to either of you." "Nor to you," Petra countered. "The stones choose their keepers, and they did not choose you." Roderick's face darkened. "I have studied the ancient texts for 20 years, sacrificed everything in pursuit of their power. I will not be denied by a woman who stumbled upon this knowledge by accident and her barbarian protector." He stepped forward, drawing a knife from within his robes. The blade gleamed strangely in the torchlight, its metal having an unusual bluish tint. "Cold iron," Petra whispered to Einar. "Forged with blood magic. Beware its touch." Einar assessed their situation quickly. Unarmed and wearing only the thin ceremonial robe, he was at a severe disadvantage against a blade. Yet he had faced worse odds in battle. The key would be to disarm Roderick without being cut. "Take the stone," he murmured to Petra. "I will handle him." Before she could respond, Einar lunged forward, feinting to draw Roderick's strike. The blade slashed through the air where Einar had been a moment before. Using the momentum of his dodge, Einar spun behind one of the natural stone columns that ringed the chamber. Roderick turned to follow, but Petra seized the opportunity to dash toward the altar. With a snarl, Roderick changed direction, moving to intercept her. Einar grabbed a loose stone from the cave floor and hurled it at Roderick's head. It struck his shoulder instead, causing him to stumble but not fall. The distraction was enough for Petra to reach the altar and grasp the large stone. As her fingers touched its surface, a low humming filled the chamber, and the cave paintings began to glow with an eerie blue light. Roderick recovered, his face contorted with rage. "Put that down," he commanded, advancing on Petra with his knife raised. Einar threw himself between them, catching Roderick's wrist as the knife descended. They struggled, Roderick's strength surprising Einar. The blue-tinged blade inched closer to Einar's throat. "Petra, go!" Einar shouted, using all his strength to keep the knife at bay. But Petra did not flee. Instead, she held the stone aloft and began to speak in the same ancient language Kalian had used during the purification ritual. The humming grew louder, and the glow from the cave paintings intensified until the entire chamber was bathed in blue light. Roderick's eyes widened in alarm. "Stop! You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Petra replied, continuing her incantation. The stone in her hands began to pulse with light, matching the rhythm of the humming. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Roderick lost his balance, giving Einar the opportunity to twist the knife from his grip. It clattered to the stone floor as a more violent tremor shook the chamber. "What's happening?" Einar called to Petra over the growing noise. "The stone is responding to the incantation," she explained, her voice strained with effort. "It's showing us the way to the temple." The trembling intensified, and small stones began to fall from the ceiling. Roderick scrambled toward the passage that led out of the chamber. "This place is collapsing," he shouted. "You'll kill us all." As if in response to his words, a large section of the ceiling gave way, blocking the passage with fallen rock. Roderick turned back, his face pale with fear. "There's no escape," he said, looking wildly around the chamber. "What have you done?" Petra lowered the stone, though it continued to pulse with light. "Not collapse," she told him calmly. "Transformation." Before their eyes, the far wall of the chamber began to shift, stones rearranging themselves to form an archway where solid rock had been moments before. Through the opening, Einar could see not the continuation of the cave but a mist-filled space that seemed to extend infinitely. "The pathway opens," Petra said, her voice filled with wonder. "Just as the ancient texts described." Roderick stared at the archway, his fear giving way to naked greed. "The direct route to the temple," he breathed. Without warning, he darted forward, attempting to snatch the stone from Petra's hands. Einar intercepted him, driving his shoulder into Roderick's midsection and sending them both crashing to the floor. They grappled among the fallen debris, Roderick fighting with the desperate strength of a man obsessed. He managed to get his hands around Einar's throat, squeezing with murderous intent. "She is mine," he hissed into Einar's face. "The stones are mine. The temple is mine." Spots danced before Einar's vision as his air was cut off. With his remaining strength, he reached blindly for anything he could use as a weapon. His fingers closed around a sharp stone, and he brought it up hard against Roderick's temple. The man's grip loosened as blood poured from the wound. Einar pushed him off, gasping for breath. Roderick stumbled to his feet, disoriented but still dangerous. He lurched toward the archway, perhaps hoping to escape through it. "No!" Petra cried out. "The passage isn't stabilized." But Roderick didn't heed her warning. He staggered through the misty opening, and vanished with a terrible scream that seemed to fade not with distance but with a passage between worlds. Petra rushed to Einar's side, helping him to his feet. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious," he assured her, though his throat burned and his body ached from the fight. "What happened to him?" "The pathway requires proper preparation to traverse safely," she explained, looking toward the archway with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Without it, the spaces between worlds will tear a soul apart." The trembling of the chamber had subsided, but the archway remained, pulsing with the same blue light as the stone in Petra's hands. She approached it cautiously, studying the mist that swirled within. "This isn't the way to the temple itself," she said after a moment. "It's a crossing point to another location where the next stone awaits." She turned to Einar. "We must follow the path while it remains open." Einar looked at the misty archway with understandable hesitation. "And we won't share Roderick's fate." Petra held up the stone, which continued to pulse rhythmically. "This will guide and protect us, but we must go together." She extended her free hand to him. "Do you trust me?" Einar took her hand without hesitation. "With my life." Together, they approached the archway. At the threshold, Petra spoke again in the ancient tongue, and the mist parted slightly, revealing glimpses of a landscape beyond, a shoreline bathed in pale light. "Take a deep breath," she instructed, "and do not let go of my hand, no matter what you see or feel." Einar squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I won't let go." They stepped into the mist together. The world around them dissolved into swirling blue light. Einar felt a sensation of falling without movement, of being everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Images flashed through his mind, fragments of past and future, possibilities and paths not taken. Through it all, Petra's hand remained firmly in his, anchoring him against the disorienting torrent of sensations. He focused on that connection, on the warmth of her fingers intertwined with his, and gradually the chaos around them began to coalesce into a new reality. Their feet touched solid ground. The mist dispersed, revealing a beach of white sand beneath a night sky filled with unfamiliar stars. Behind them, the archway through which they had passed was nowhere to be seen. "Where are we?" Einar asked, his voice sounding strange to his ears. Petra looked around, her expression one of wonder. Far from Alba, she replied. Perhaps farther than we can comprehend. She held up the large stone, which had stopped pulsing but still emitted a faint glow. But this is where we need to be. In the distance, stone structures rose against the starlit sky, not the work of Vikings or Saxons or even Romans, but something older and more profound. Petra pointed toward them. There, she said with quiet certainty. The next stone awaits us there. As they began walking toward the ancient structures, Einar realized their hands were still joined. Neither made any move to separate. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, the Viking and the scholar, bound by forces beyond their understanding yet perfectly clear to their hearts. The journey had truly begun.